Hey, what's up, guys? This is Carson, and welcome back to another video. Thank you guys for coming to watch this. I know it's been, I haven't been uploading a lot, and I know that, and again, like I said in a previous video, it's because I'm busy working on school and this soundtrack and other music. This month, I do have something coming out finally for the Cinematic Captures competition. It's a competition where people make animations or live action Star Wars films, short films, and they send them in. And the rules were they needed music and they couldn't steal from anything or use anything from the actual stuff. So I worked on one of them, and that should be coming out around my birthday, which is actually this month on the 19th. So I'll be celebrating that, and then hopefully that will also come out on that day. But anyways, today we have a special video with a very special guest, Curtis. If you guys don't know who I'm talking about, he is a composer for Starbound, airships, Halo Infinite. He's mostly worked on indie games, so that's why you may not recognize the first two things I listed off. But you should know what Halo Infinite is if you are on the internet. If you are a gamer, you should know what I'm talking about. He's very, very good at producing and composing and just everything. And if you guys haven't checked him out, links are going to be in the description. He streams on Twitch sometimes, and yeah, he's really cool. He's very awesome for doing this video with me. And these questions, I was nervous sending them in, so you know, I might be very weird in these questions. Anyways, I hope you guys like this video, and I hope for those of you who are curious about music production and games and all that kind of stuff, I hope that you enjoy this because he shares some really good information about that kind of stuff. Hey Curtis, so my first question is, how are you doing? Is there anything in life that's happening that's interesting that you're allowed to share and that you want to share right now?
I mean, I guess the big thing is that, there's this Halo game coming out soon, so that's certainly something that I've been looking forward to for a very long time. I've been working on this project since early 2019, so it's been a long time, and I'm just really excited to finally get that game out and into everybody's hands and get the soundtrack out and see what people think about what we've put together. So that's certainly one of the big things that I'm excited about. And yeah, other than that, been working on some other projects. I recently did some work for the PUBG mobile game. So when you boot up that in your phone or whatever, the music that you hear now is mine. So that was really fun to work on.
So my first real question is just kind of a basic general question, but what got you into music and what are your inspirations and what made you want to get into doing things for games and filming and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I've always been into music. I sort of started doing it more in like a concert setting. So I think if you were to ask me, 20 years ago, what do you want to do with composition? It would have been, I want to write, stuff that gets published by a music publisher that then is performed, in concerts for, choirs and orchestras and stuff like that. And the way I got into like games and media and stuff is, I mean, partially it's just practical. If you want to make a living writing music, media is one of the better places to do it. So that's always been kind of something in the back of my mind that I thought about maybe doing. But I mean, games, I've always played games, and it just occurred to me, I guess probably later than it should have, that people write music for games. You write music, why don't you try your hand at that? And so I started getting on forums and trying to talk to devs and see what they wanted. I remember I did some like game mod projects, like really big mod projects. I did some big like Middle Earth project thing like way early on, and that was great because that gives you sort of the experience of writing, for interactive stuff without it being quite, everything's on the line. It gives you the chance to kind of try out the genre, and I really liked it, so I kept pursuing stuff. And after a lot of work and after writing a lot of music that wasn't in anything, I finally managed to get in contact with the Starbound developers, and they liked my stuff, and I guess the rest is sort of history from there.
Another question I also had, kind of relating to you getting into scoring games and all that kind of stuff. I was wondering, how do people that are new to getting into scoring things and working on games, how do you get into doing that kind of thing? Because I know there's a lot of people who I know and just in general who probably are curious about it, both either wanting to do it or they're just curious about it in general. So, how does that work?
Yeah, I get this question a lot, and earlier on in my career, I certainly had this question a lot, like how do I get onto a project? And it's really hard to answer because there's no real one way that I've heard. I've heard people who get on projects by, you know, being like a composer's assistant, and that gets their music in front of, people who that composer works for. I've heard of people who, pursue other musical careers entirely, and that's, when people hear their music, in more of like a maybe an album setting or on the radio or whatever. That's how they get picked for something. It's really kind of difficult. The best I can tell you is to just write a lot, a lot, a lot. I mean, you really, really have to put out like a lot of music into the world to get noticed by anyone for anything. So the more you can write and the more you can do that consistently and really put stuff out there, and find venues where you're motivated to write. So for me, I did some like on the side kind of like royalty free library stuff for a really, really long time, and that was motivating to me because even though I wasn't maybe making my living off of it, it was enough to maybe buy a sample library once or twice a year from money I made in music, and that gave me the experience to really just pump out lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of music. You got to hang out in places where people are looking for music. So hanging out on game development boards, hanging out on in places where devs chat socially. I mean, not being annoying about it. Always remember that networking is about what you can do for other people. It's about you offering something to other people. It's not about people offering jobs to you. So going in and saying, I want to write for games, give me a job, is not going to get you a whole lot of places. But if you can go on to some dev board and help them out with something, maybe even they already have a composer and you're able to help them with a thorny audio editing problem, or to maybe rewrite a line with a different sample library for them, or anything like that, where you can bring something valuable to the table, that gets you that relationship a lot. So, I mean, it's a tough answer because there's really no one way to do it. But I can tell you that the one thing that I think really separates, if you will, the wheat from the chaff is just consistency and not giving up and continuing to try. I'm on a podcast for a little Discord community I'm a part of called Composing Made Simple, and one of the things we always sort of come back to is that it's sort of like a slot machine, right? Like the first time you pull the lever on the slot machine is not necessarily going to be the time you win the jackpot. It's going to be the 100th time or the 1,000th time. So you just got to pull that lever on that slot machine as much as you can, and that means just writing as much music as you can. That means making yourself available as much as you can, and really, when you're doing that, not just doing it as sort of like an obligation, but doing it because you love it and doing it because you're passionate about the music that you're writing and you really like it. And always pursue things, even if they're not, if you want to get into media, you're going to probably end up writing a lot of music for stuff, that isn't media. If you can write music for, local, choral or orchestra, community orchestra groups or whatever, that's also really good experience. And that can sometimes get you to places that you didn't know about. That's one more pull of that lever on that slot machine. So it's really just trying to, I guess, go out there and just do everything. Say yes to as many things as possible, and do as many things as you can. And that's hard. I understand that sometimes people are starting from scratch and maybe they don't know anybody who's in an orchestra. Maybe they don't know anybody who is a game dev. See if you can figure it out. Start by going on like Reddit boards. Start by going on forums. Like I said earlier, maybe try and get connected with some people who are making these big, there's a lot of people who are legitimate game developers who, what they do is they make mods for games. They make like a total conversion for Skyrim or Fallout or whatever. Those projects can be really, really helpful, and that can give you a lot of that experience. So just really being open to that and consistently writing lots and lots of music as much as is humanly possible is the best advice I can give you.
So as I've seen, you've done a lot of music for different kind of games. Like you've done work for Starbound and Halo Infinite and all these other different kinds of games, and they're different in genre. I was wondering if there's a specific genre that you personally like to work on, or do you just like to work on any genre of game and experiment and try things out?
Yeah, I really enjoy doing like orchestral stuff. One of the things when people always ask me like, "What is like your favorite game you've worked on?" I usually give the very diplomatic answer of, it's like, kids, pick your favorite kid. You can't do that. I can't pick my favorite game I've worked on. They're all great, right? One game that I feel I always push this one because it just was really in a cool wheelhouse and genre for me was the game Airships Conquer the Skies, and it's by a developer named David Stark. He goes by the handle Zarkonin. Sometimes I'm not sure if he does anymore, but anyway. And the reason I really always bring that one up is because it just gave me this chance to do all this really kind of frenetic, almost kind of, I guess, sort of Danny Elfman-ish orchestral stuff. Like, I really like writing for orchestra. And I know that that's not like a genre necessarily, but if I had to narrow down like what I like to write for, it's definitely that. It's like large orchestral ensembles. But having said that, some of my favorite stuff I did for Starbound was actually in their Bounty Hunter update, which is like just total synth, sort of my pathetic attempt to do synth waves sort of music. And, it was really fun to try something new and try something different. So I guess that would be my answer to that. It's sort of both. It's like I like to do lots of different fun, varied things. Within reason. I think there's some musical genres that it's better if I leave it to the professionals, as it were. But if I had to pick something that's definitely my favorite, it's definitely orchestral, maybe even like choral music, because that's sort of where I got my start and what I feel the most comfortable and proficient in.
You have done a lot of work on different kinds of games, different genres of games. I was wondering if there's a specific game or project in general that has been the most challenging for you so far. I don't know if you're not allowed to say what it is because of NDA, because I know that you have stuff that you probably can't talk about yet. But just in general, is there a project that's been most challenging for you? And if you're allowed to say, why was that the case?
Yeah, I can definitely answer this question. It's definitely Halo, just because it's the first AAA project I've worked on. I mean, I prior to Halo, all I'd done was little indie games, and there's nothing wrong with indie games, and I'm really proud of my indie work, and I want to do more indie work because I really enjoy working on stuff that's a little smaller and more intimate, I guess. But yeah, working in a AAA environment is a big change from working on just small stuff. Working on a team where you're getting feedback from not one person or 5 people, but just this huge, vast array. I mean, the amount of feedback that 343 gets on everything is just tremendous. I mean, they have basically people at their company who do nothing but provide feedback so that we can understand where this huge, wide, diverse community that is Halo, where they're all coming from on our work. And working on a AAA project is it's hard. You gotta shave things down. You gotta really make everything perfect. I mean, I've sort of told this story before, but I'll tell it again. I mean, when we worked on Discover Hope, I think we ended up in, I think it was like 20 some odd drafts, between 20 and 30 drafts, probably closer to 30, if you include like little minor revisions of that, because it just had to be right. It has to be perfect. It has to be right, and you have to be willing to really butt your head up against the wall and just keep changing, keep revising, keep polishing, keep making everything as good as it can be in this space. And that's been really challenging for me because, in the indie space, a lot of times you get to make something and, there's your audience is a little smaller, right? Like the feedback you're getting from the organization you're selling this music to is a little smaller. So the amount of people that give you feedback is smaller. And so it's easier to make that many people happy. It's a lot harder to make, a huge number of people happy. Our stuff gets reviewed by us, the internal audio team. It gets sent up to, the audio director. It gets sent up to the game director. Then it gets sent up, I'm sure, all the way up the chain to people at Microsoft, the big mama mothership, and they get feedback too, and that's awesome, right? Because my music has probably been in front of those people, but it also means that you get a lot of notes, and you have to be willing to go in and just swallow your pride and make the changes and be happy that you get a chance to get paid to write music today. And this goes back kind of to that, just as an aside, that comment I was talking about doing music every day. I mean, if you're not used to, habitually sitting down and working on music and habitually working on revising your music, that can be really difficult. It was challenging for me because I revise music. I mean, when I work on something, I do a lot of drafts of it on my own, but not to this level. And it was a big challenge to sort of be in that environment and to really try to get used to that flow and really finding the ways to be precise in my edits, right, and precise in what I was going for, and having a really clear vision of how is this change going to address this feedback that I've gotten, that this piece needs to be more like this, etc. So that has been really challenging. It's been super fun. It's been awesome, and I cannot wait to get it out. But it's been a challenge. It's definitely been the most challenging thing I've worked on, and that's been really fun.
So when it comes to scoring games, do you find yourself making music depending on what's happening on screen and what the player is doing, or do you make music more based off of the location and the environment and the atmosphere of whatever level or world the player is on?
This might be a somewhat cheater answer, but it depends, I guess. The cool thing about games is that they're collaborative. So oftentimes you're getting direction just like you would maybe like on a film from a director. And sometimes they want things to be location based, and sometimes they want things to be maybe a little more general, maybe a little bit more of they want combat music, for example, or they want, ambient music, background music, explore music, for example. So it just kind of depends on what my direction is. On Starbound, all of the music is kind of, I wouldn't say it's strictly based on location or biome, I guess, in the world generator, but a lot of it is sort of approached that way. Certainly, when we were first working, we were definitely working on the idea of, well, we will write desert music, right? We will write jungle planet music. We will write ice biome music. But like in airships, it's more like occasion based, right? Like airships is a game that has these sort of very unique, special. I don't want to say, I guess, unique and special, but distinct is the word I'm searching for. Modes where sometimes you're building a ship, or you're making that ship fight, or you're doing this big strategic thing where you're deciding where your ships are going to fight, and the music is more based on sort of those distinct modes of the game than it is on location. But with Halo, there's sort of a mixed approach, I would say, where we have a lot of music that is for an activity, but we also have music that is for specific things in the game. Obviously when the flight came out, there is menu music, right? That is designed for the menu. Now, does that mean you won't hear it somewhere else? I don't know. It depends on what our audio team decides works, right? But it was definitely written from more of a menu idea rather than like a character or a place necessarily. So it just kind of depends. I certainly think that there are, on a big AAA game like Halo, you're going to find stuff that is all of those approaches depending on the situation. But largely I would say, and again, I sort of am falling back on this advice to composers, right? Be good at everything, right? Be good at writing character themes, be good at writing location themes, be good at writing music that can generally be used in lots of places and for lots of characters. With games, it's a lot of your writing is about trying to make music that can be pulled apart so that it can be used in lots of different ways. I recently did a little game by a single developer for her, I believe, her graduate project. She's getting like an I'm not sure the exact degree. I hope I don't offend, but I think it's maybe an MFA in game design, right? One of the things I did for her was all the music can be teased apart. I gave her stems that can be pulled apart in time, right? Like you can take this minute and loop it, but also, you can pull out just the strings from that minute. And they work all together. So it's trying to sort of write music that is both sort of horizontal and vertical in terms of how it can be pulled apart. And that really can be a difficult approach if you're not used to it. So, as you're writing your stuff, as you're doing, your daily stuff, try to see what you can do to write like a minute that loops, and then try to make, say, 2 minutes that maybe it doesn't loop, but you can maybe pull the drums out and they're interesting all by themselves. It's always just trying to write interesting stuff for whatever direction you've been given.
So, as a fan of your work, I have listened to your music and I've listened to your soundtracks, and I noticed that in things like Starbound, you use piano and you use strings. And I was wondering how much of the music you have with those kind of instruments are recorded live instruments, or how much of that is sample libraries or VSTs, and if it is a majority of it VSTs and sample libraries, is there a special technique that you do to make it sound more realistic, or how do you work around using those kind of sounds if they are fake?
So a thing I try to encourage, especially newer composers, to think about is that like writing for samples doesn't necessarily have to feel. I don't mind the fact that you use the word fake. Don't get me wrong. I'm not offended at all, but I don't like to use that word because it sort of implies that like you can do whatever. It implies two things. It implies you can kind of do whatever you want with the instrument, and two, that like it's somehow illegitimate to some people, right? Especially really, snooty academic people, right? You're writing to samples. Ooh. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. But what I'm saying is, like, I always encourage people, if you're going to write for, like, a string orchestra and you're going to use samples, write it just like you would a regular string orchestra. As much as possible, separate your lines. Write a violin 1, 2, viola, cello, and double bass part. Because not only will that help you if someday, you get the call from Steven Spielberg wants you to write his score for his next movie because you're used to writing for real instruments. They're going to record those, right, for a giant project like that. But also because I think that samples sound best when you're approaching them as much as possible like they are the real instruments. Because they are, right? Like, they sampled real violins for strings. They sampled real pianos for most of those pianos. So as much as you can actually hew to something that's a little more quote-unquote realistic in your writing, I think it's going to cause the sample to shine a little bit more. So, and I'll just say right now, almost everything you've heard of mine that is not on Halo is 100% sample libraries. That's almost entirely what I write for, even today. Like when I mentioned I did some work on PUBG Mobile, it's all sampled. It's all sampled instruments at the moment. That may change someday, but right now it's just samples. And the way I think that you approach samples in order to produce a realistic mock-up is to really understand the actual instruments and to, as much as possible, hew to realistic writing for those instruments. With sample libraries, you're always going to have compromises. There is not a single sample library where you can just pretend like you're writing for strings and then ignore what the sample sounds like, because you're going to get fake sounding brass or strings or winds or whatever doing that. So you do have to be willing to, well, that line doesn't sound great in sampled strings, for instance, and work around that. And it's just a matter of knowing your libraries. And this is, I'm going to go on another tangent here. This is another thing I see with composers of all, experience levels is, they get really dissatisfied when a sample library can't do the thing that they want. And that's a completely understandable place to come from. But it's also sort of the reality of writing with samples. And so I always encourage people to spend a lot of time in their sample libraries and learning what their libraries can and cannot do, so that when they go to write music, it sort of instinctually causes you to sort of gravitate towards lines of music that are, um, realistic and are going to work well for that sample. Um, it helps to have lots of different libraries, of course. I understand that sample libraries are expensive. Not everybody can do that. But, you can get one of these big orchestra packages, BBCSO. I started out with East West's Hollywood series. You can get lots of stuff from Berlin or whatever. I'm, of course, leaving out lots of great developers. But you can get all these big orchestral sample libraries. And I really encourage people, just stick with one for a second. Just like learn that one library. Know what it can do. Know what it can't do. Know the tricks. You know where to layer maybe two samples together. And once you've mastered that library, then maybe it's time to look at something else. Because I see so many people that are really dissatisfied. I have 18 string libraries and I can't complete a piece or whatever. Well, that's because there's so many choices in front of you that you don't know where to start. If you just limit yourself to one or two libraries, and really, really learn those in depth, and then move on to the next one and learn that one really in depth, you start to be able to sort of snowball together a lot of different sort of areas of expertise. Every sample library is like a new instrument. You wouldn't sit in front of a piano for the first time and expect yourself to sound really, really good. You would expect to have to practice. You wouldn't expect to pick up the violin and be playing like Hilary Hahn day one. You would have to do lots of practicing. You wouldn't even, once you knew an instrument like a piano, expect to be able to sit in front of a Steinway versus a Bose versus a Mason and Hamlin versus a Yamaha and necessarily be able to produce the exact same level of expertise. There's going to be one of those that maybe you prefer, maybe you don't like, maybe that you learn to draw the good sound out of. And sample libraries are exactly the same. So always spend a lot of time in your libraries and really know what sounds good first, then worry about how many you have. And of course, having said that, understand that like a lot of what can make a library sound good is to mix it with another library. A lot of times you can find a library that has really maybe great detail in its close mic, but then another library has something like a more full surround. And it's amazing how sometimes you can just layer those together and you get the best of both worlds. And know that like that's happening on the back end of every film, game, whatever. Like there's probably samples in there somewhere, and they're probably mixed and layered. Like, I started off by talking about how you need to think about your samples from a more realistic perspective. And from a writing perspective, I agree. From a production perspective, layering 24 violins from library A and 18 violins from library B does not sound like, 40 violins or 42 violins or whatever. Like it sounds like one string section if you do it right. So as you're sort of increasing your proficiency with one library and maybe adding another library, then you have to master how they interact together and what's a good solution for putting them together. So that's the more libraries you have, sort of the expertise you have to have sort of exponentially increases. So spend lots of time in them, and you'll find that you're able to pull off a lot of really interesting things.
For Halo Infinite, there are a few different composers working with you, and I was wondering, what is it like to work with several different composers on one soundtrack, and how do you all keep a consistent overall sound and texture to the soundtrack without it differentiating too much from the fact that there's multiple composers working on the project?
Well, first of all, if you're me and you haven't worked in the AAA space as much as maybe some of your other co-composers, you sort of cower in the corner wondering how you ended up on a project with such big names. But yeah, I mean, we have a music supervisor, Joel Yarger, who does an amazing job of keeping everybody sort of on mission, I guess, for style and overall variety. And there's a lot of different kinds of music in Halo Infinite. We've heard it in the flights, the great post-rock stuff for the multiplayer, but even on the campaign and open world side, it's a little bit it's got to have varied styles. There's exploration music and combat music, and there's music for characters and different places and different ideas, I guess. All, sort of within the context of all the Halo music that's come before us, right? We want to make sure that we're paying a lot of respect to all the composers who've come before us from Halo CE all the way through 5. So, and all the Halo Wars stuff, etc. We sort of get our assignments, or at least this has been my experience. I kind of get an assignment, and I do the assignment, and then I kind of get feedback on how this is integrating with everything. The cool thing about Halo is, I mean, there's definitely like the Halo sound, and there's a lot of really distinct things that you can do from a music theory standpoint, using a lot of different, the modes that have been used before, using instrumentations that have been used before, really keeping to the sonic palette of the Halo, I guess, sound. And if you do that, it's amazing how even composers who have a lot of different styles can sort of write stuff that sort of sits next to each other, really well, and sort of has dialogue with the other parts of the soundtrack, in a really cordial manner, I guess. Just by following sort of a little bit of guidelines like that. So, I will say that all in all, I have found it just amazing to work with a bunch of other composers. It's really calming, I guess, to me, sort of the new guy in the room, to have big names on this soundtrack and to see the resumes of the other people and the really impressive work they've done on other games. So to me, that's been really, really wonderful to have and to be able to, I guess, sort of lean on, if you will. I don't know. That kind of sounds odd to say, but to sort of know that they're doing great work, I can write something that can sit with them, and I can sort of listen to what they're doing. And of course, all of this is really, we have to give a lot of props to Joel Yarger for really coordinating us all and keeping us all on the same page and giving us assignments that all work together. So, I mean, it's really an interesting experience. It's really fun to go to a recording session with other composers and to be able to hear my music, their music, to see how it all works together, and to see like sort of the overall plan and how it all fits. So I've really enjoyed it, and I really would like to do more of it in the future because I found it really, really, I mean, just fun, just really, really fun overall. So.
This is just kind of a closing thing. I just wanted to say thank you again. Hopefully you had fun answering these questions. I really wanted to do an interview with you because, like I said, I am a big fan of your work, both for Halo Infinite, which is probably what a lot of people are talking to you about now, because that's obviously a very big game coming up, or just in general. I really do like your stuff, and I've hopped in a couple of your streams. You probably don't remember me, but a while ago, it was months ago, I remember talking to you on stream one time about something about BBC Orchestra or something like that, and it was really fun. So again, thank you for doing this, and I hope you have a good day.
Oh, I remember. Yeah, that was a fun stream. Yeah, I don't do that as much as I should. It's kind of hard. I work from out of my house, and while I can work on music while a child is in here playing, it's hard to stream when they're in here making noise or whatever. So yeah, it's been great to be here. I really love to do these, like I said in the opening, and I really appreciate you sending the questions along, and I look forward to, the future. So thanks.